This is part 3 of parliamentary training for FCCLA. You should have already watched the handling main motions video, then the subsidiary motions video, and this is the last installment regarding privileged and incidental motions. This is Kirby Glad, your instructor, a professional registered parliamentarian. This is a little review of what we talked about in the last video. There are different types of secondary motions. There are the subsidiary motions, which we've already discussed. Then we have privileged motions, which are relating to the overall handling of assembly business. And then there are incidental motions, which are related to process. Now, just to review, we talked about these subsidiary motions, and we've already discussed those in detail. So now we're going to move on to a higher level. Remember that these subsidiary motions are in order, which means that when one of these is on the floor, anything above it is in order to be moved, and those below it are not in order. So the same idea applies to privileged motions. Privileged motions relate to the work of the assembly, but not to a specific motion. So, for example, we'll list these again. The highest priority will be at the top. The lowest priority will be at the bottom. The highest priority is fix the time to which to adjourn. Most people don't understand what that means. It's a little confusing. It simply means that to pick the time when we're going to continue the meeting. We can actually end the meeting with a continuance, a partial meeting, and say, okay, well, let's have an adjourned meeting or a continuation on Friday, and then we'll do it again. After the next in lower priority is adjourn, then recess. Adjourn means to end the meeting, recess means to take a break, raise a question of privilege, and call for the orders of the day. Call for the orders of the day simply means we need to get back to our agenda. So if we stack these up now in order of priority, all the subsidiary motions are below the privileged motions, and these are in order. So, for example, the same rule applies if we have something, if a motion to postpone to a certain time is on the table, then it is also in order to motion for a recess or to adjourn because it's above or higher in the list. But those things that are below are not in order. So if we have a motion to adjourn and that is on the floor right now, the only thing that you could move that would be in order is fix the time to which to adjourn, but not recess. Okay, those that are above are in order even if a lower ranked motion is on the floor. Then remember the privileged motions are above the subsidiary motions, and remember this that showed us which ones are debatable. So the debatable ones are the first 4 of the subsidiary motions. Everything above that is not debatable. We've already talked about why the subsidiary motions are not debatable. The reason that the privileged motions are not debatable is because they're very powerful. Like, as soon as someone raises a privileged motion, we have to consider it. It becomes the priority. It takes precedence over anything else that's happening. So to make that debatable then would put too much power in the hands of one person, the one person making the motion. So if somebody wanted to delay the meeting, they could simply make one of these privileged motions, and then if it was debatable, they could spend all the time in the meeting arguing about these procedural issues. So that's not allowed. We don't allow one person to Shanghai or take power over the meeting in an unfair way. So all of the privileged motions are not debatable. Now, in FCCLA competition, we don't have to demonstrate all of these. The ones that must be demonstrated are the ones that are described here and we've already talked about the subsidiary motions that are required. So we're going to now have some training about just these privilege motions, recess, and raise a question of privilege. Now, in FCCLA competition, you can cover recess or raise a question of privilege. You're not required to do both. Now, doing both doesn't necessarily get you any more points, except that you may get more points in other areas like following procedures, or if you impress the judge and they think that, wow, these guys really know their stuff, then you might get higher scores. But it doesn't really do you much good to cover both of these. So when you're trying to make a decision of which motion to cover, I would suggest do the simple one. You can get 3 points out of doing the simple one correctly, just as much as you can get 3 points out of doing the complicated one correctly. You may get more points elsewhere, or like, as I said, the followed procedures or something like that from a judge if you do the complicated one. But if then you mess up the complicated one, you have a little bit of a risk there. You may get actually less points attempting the complicated version and not accomplishing it correctly than you would if you just do the simple one and nail it. So let's look at these two, recess or raise a question of privilege. Now, the motion to recess is a privileged motion, of course. The purpose of it is to take a break. Now, if you make a motion to recess, you must include when the recess will be over. So the problem here is that someone makes a motion to recess, and then we vote on it, and now we're in recess, and how do we get back out of recess? The chair just can't say, okay, the recess is done, right? Because the assembly is one that's in charge, and the assembly has said that we're going to recess. So you have to include when the recess will be done or how long it will last, some way that we know when it's going to be over. If you just tell everyone in the assembly hall, okay, take a recess, and they all go out, and maybe they go to dinner, or maybe they go to McDonald's or whatever, they don't know because you haven't told them when they need to be back. So you must also always include when the recess will be over, and it could be a number of minutes, or hours, or until a certain time, or until the credential report is filed, but no more than 10 minutes, something like that. You just have to let people know when the recess will be over, or else you really can hurt yourself. The chair should make sure that the recess motion is correct. One of the jobs of the chair is to make sure that every motion being put to the body is clear and concise and in order. And it's the chair's job to rule motions out of order or to perfect the motions in a little back and forth and help the person who's trying to make the motion to make it correctly. That's the job of the chair, to be a servant leader. So the way that you would do this, by example, is after being recognized, you cannot interrupt anyone for a motion to recess, even though it's a privileged motion. I move that we recess for 10 minutes. Perfect example. Now it only requires a majority vote, and then you can have your recess. Now, in your competition, make sure that everyone will vote no on the recess. This is the simple one. If you have to choose between recess and a question of privilege, pick recess. It's really simple. Just make sure that everyone on your team votes it down, or else you'll have to just sit there for 10 minutes. So if someone makes a motion to recess for 10 minutes, then you have to sit there for 10 minutes, which is half your time, if you vote for it. So don't vote for it. And you can control that. I've seen some teams, well, let's take a recess for 30 seconds or whatever. And then they vote for it. Then they just sit there quietly for 30 seconds. It's a waste of time. So what I suggest is to go ahead and make a motion for recess. Make sure it's done at the appropriate place in the meeting. Now, as a privileged motion, you can make a motion for recess at any time. So you could be in the middle of discussing an amendment. You could be in the middle of lay on the table. You could be in the middle of any of the subsidiary motions or the lower privileged motions, and you can make a motion for recess. That, I think, shows a correct understanding of the rules. And I don't think you need, as a judge, I don't think you need to actually adopt the recess in order to get full points for it. So show your knowledge by making the motion for recess at a time that's in order, and then vote it down, and bango, success. Now, the raise a question of privilege, and you'll see why I say that the motion for recess is quite a bit more simple. But you could do a raise a question of privilege, and you could also show your knowledge of the rules that way. And it's not so complicated, so it's very doable. The purpose of a question of privilege is to bring up a problem that deals with the privileges of the assembly or the privileges of its members. So matters of privilege of the assembly could be it's too noisy. Could you please tell everyone to be quiet? Can we shut the doors because there's too many people talking in the hall? It's too hot in the room. The sound system isn't working back here. We can't hear what's going on. We need to go into an executive session to discuss private matters or to remove guests from the assembly hall. All of these things that have to do with the rights of the members, or in other words, their ability to participate in the meeting, would be privileges of the assembly. A personal privilege may be, I don't believe that my vote is being recorded correctly on the electronic voting device, or I did not receive the correct ballot for this election, or anything that it has to do with the rights of the member to participate. A personal privilege can also be used for a strictly personal message. It could be, I would just like to thank the chair of the meeting and all the officers for their amazing work. Or I would just like to inform the assembly that our good friend John Brown, who was our past president, has died this week, and the funeral is on Tuesday. So those kind of personal little messages are also done by a question of privilege. A question of privilege is not used to debate. It's not used to be recognized in preference to others for getting your point across about a motion that's going on. It's strictly about these other issues that have nothing to do with the business at hand. Now, an example of a question of privilege could be, you first would say, I rise to a question of privilege. Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, or whatever is the custom in your group, I rise to a question of privilege. And then the chair immediately goes to that person as a priority and says, well, what is the question of privilege? It's very hot in this part of the room. Can we turn the air conditioning on? Okay? So this is which type of privilege is this about? Is this about the assembly or about the person? It's about the assembly. That's right. It's like the conditions that we're all enduring are horrendous. Now, here's an interesting case because, as you may know, some people always feel cold, and some people always feel hot, regardless of the temperature, and then there's the average, which are sort of in the middle. So normally the chair will simply deal with this by saying, yeah, it does feel very hot in here, and he'll direct the secretary, please go over and turn on the air conditioning. Or he may say, well, I don't know, it kind of seems the right temperature to me. And then the chair could open it to debate. Now that's really complicated. I don't suggest you do this in competition. But the chair could ask for debate on the question of, is it too hot in the room? And then we could vote. All those who would like to turn the air conditioner up, please say aye. Those who feel that it's a comfortable temperature already, please say no. And you can actually vote on it. But most things are taken care of by the chair. Yes, let's get someone from the building to go work on the sound system. Okay, thank you for your announcement. We're sorry to hear that Joe Smith died. Any of those kind of things. So that is the question of privilege. Now we have the topic of incidental motions. Now you recall that I said before that incidental motions are about process. So privileged motions are very general, having to do with the work of the assembly as a whole. Should we go home? Should we recess? Any of those kinds of things. When should we meet again? Subsidiary motions are always attached to a specific motion. and how we handle that specific motion. Incidental motions are more process related. They usually do have to do with the motion that's on the floor, but it can be more general. But for the most part, it is about the motion that's on the floor, but it's about the process. It's not about the consideration of the motion or about handling the specific motion, deciding on the main motion. It's more about the process. So here's some incidental motions. One is a point of order. If someone feels the rules aren't being followed. An appeal to a point of order, which is someone in the assembly disagrees with the way that the chair has ruled on a point of order and wants to appeal to the assembly. The assembly is always ultimately in charge. Everything that the chair does can be overruled by the assembly. The chair is not a dictator. The chair is a servant. Suspend the rules when we want to do something that would otherwise be against our parliamentary rules. If there's a question that is so damaging to even talk about it, like if somebody makes a motion, I don't know why anyone would, but let's say someone makes a motion that only people of a certain race can be admitted to the meeting. Well, that's outrageous. We're not going to even debate that. It's ridiculous. So that would be a way to use the objection of the consideration of a question. Division of a question is how to divide a question that has multiple parts. Also, consideration by paragraph or seriatim is if you have a long resolution with different parts and you want to just vote on each paragraph at a time. Division of the assembly is to call for a standing vote. Methods of voting, like I move we take a ballot on this motion, or I move that we do a counted vote, or I move that we do a roll call vote. None of these are in the competition. Motions related to nominations, opening nominations, closing nominations, things like that. Those are incidental motions. Incidental to an election. Request to be excused from a duty. When someone resigns, it's actually a motion of a request to be excused from a duty, and that's a motion that can be voted on. And there are various requests and inquiries. A request for information. Years ago, this was called a point of information, which people thought was the way you use that by making your point, like they would use it for debate. Point of information. Yes, what's your point? Well, what he just said was wrong because of this fact, and that fact. The request for information, just so you know, is used to get information, not to give information. A parliamentary inquiry is used for asking questions about the rules, and there are some other types of requests, but the ones that are used by FCCLA in competition are the ones that are underlined here. So you don't need to really learn about these other ones, but I just wanted you to know about them and understand that what you're doing is a subset of all of Robert's rules. So you have a choice between doing a point of order or a parliamentary inquiry. And in this case, both of them are pretty easy. So you can do whatever you want. Pick either one. I think you can, whatever seems interesting or fun to you to do, you can pick that one. A division of the question or a division of the assembly. Now, in this case, the division of the assembly is super simple. The division of a question isn't rocket science. It certainly could be done, and you could demonstrate it. But you could get full points for a division of the assembly, and so why bother? So anyway, that's just a little suggestion. And then a request for information is another one. I believe that they have the request for information in the competition so that all the students learn the proper use of the request for information, because that's one of probably the top 10 mistakes that people make in meetings is and why it was changed to request for information and away from point of information is that people are trying to make their points using this incidental motion. All right, so let's look at a point of order. The purpose of this is to make a complaint that a rule is not being followed. Now, it is not to disagree with the motion. So, point of order, I've seen the point of order used because the point of order as a you get instant recognition. If you say you have a point of order, the chair will immediately recognize you. It's a rule that the point of order has a precedence over other motions, even over a motion to adjourn, or even over a motion to um, uh, set the time to which to adjourn, which is the highest privilege motion. The reason is because if we're not following the rules, we need to stop and fix it. So the purpose of the point of order is to complain that the rule is not being followed. There's some rule not being followed. So I have heard some people use the point of order to say, well, what the member stated in debate is not correct, and then they go on to correct the person. That is not a point of order. As long as you're being decorous and polite in debate, you can say anything that you want. It's not out of order. It's your opinion, unless you're flat out lying. But even if you are lying, it's not a point of order, unless you are calling names or violating the rules of debate. So a point of order means we're violating a rule. Now, a point of order can even interrupt a speaker if it is urgent. If the violation of the rule is happening right this minute, for example, we're debating something that is a non-debatable motion, you can interrupt the person who's speaking and say, point of order, this is not a debatable motion, right? If we are proceeding on to another item of business, and the last thing we didn't follow the rules, then you need to get up and even interrupt the speaker so that the point of order about the previous decision can be recognized before we move on. Once you move on to the next item of business, generally the point of order is expired. You can't. You have to bring up a point of order in a timely way. It has to be brought up exactly when the error occurs. Because if you go on to, now we've voted on 2 or 3 things, or even one thing after that, it's too late. You can't raise a point of order for something that happened, 2 motions ago, except in very specific exceptions. So an example is, member A says, Mr. Chair, point of order. And that's all you say. And then the chair will say, the member is recognized, please state the point of order. And the member may say, the amendment is not germane. Or you have not called for a no vote. Or I'm just trying to think of different rules that could be broken. Or we should be having a ballot vote for this election and not a vote by raise of hands. Or we should not be reporting abstentions in the vote report. Whatever is the rule that has been broken. Now, don't be a jerk. It's no one will like you if you raise a point of order for every little ticky-tack thing that happens. Like if someone raises a point of order. Point of order. Yes, what's your point of order? Well, the proper language for stating the motion is to say it is moved and seconded, and the chair said it was moved and seconded, and that's not right. Well, yes, that's a small infraction of the rule. It's not the most perfect way of phrasing it, but did it really hurt anything? So people who raise silly points of order will soon be found to be what's called dilatory, and everybody will just start ignoring you. So in real life, you don't do that. And so your point of order for the competition should be some kind of valid point of order. So, for example, here's one that might be good. Now, don't everybody do this, but somebody makes a main motion, and then somebody makes a motion to amend the main motion. That's a primary amendment. And then somebody makes a motion to amend the amendment. That's a secondary amendment. And then somebody makes a motion to amend the secondary amendment. And the chair says, okay, it's been moved to amend the secondary amendment, such and such. Now, that would be a great way to raise a point of order. And the point of order is you cannot amend the secondary amendment. You can only amend a primary amendment. That would show a good understanding of the rules. So that you can you can have to decide what is the thing that you want to raise a point of order about, but it can be really any violation of the rules. And in competition, raising a point of order is also a great way to help your team out. So let's say that the chair, for some reason, forgets to call for discussion of a question before saying, "Okay, we'll now go to the vote," and puts the question. Well, help the chair out by saying, "Mr. Chair, point of order. What's your point?" We did not call for a debate. There was no discussion on this motion, so it's not ready for a vote. Oh, thank you. Well, now you just helped out the chair, and the judge will never know if the chair actually forgot to call for debate, which you would lose points for, or if you were just doing that intentionally to demonstrate the point of order. So you can raise a point of order if any member of the team sees that some rule was not followed, and that will help you in your score for the rubric item followed parliamentary procedure. Now, when a point of order is made, the chair must respond to it and make a ruling. The chair is the one that responds and makes a ruling of all points of order, never the parliamentarian or any other officer, although the chair may ask for or consult with the rule book or any other members or anything like that, the parliamentarian, the secretary, whomever the chair feels has the right information. The chair should respond in one of two ways. The point is well taken, meaning, "Oh yeah, you're right, we'll fix that." Or, "The point is not well taken," meaning your point of order is not correct and should be accompanied by some explanation. So, in this case, let's take the example that's on the screen. The member says, "The amendment is not germane." Then the chair could say, "Oh, well, your point is well taken. The amendment is not germane, and the amendment is out of order. The motion on the floor now is the main motion," and then goes off to the next point of business. Or the chair could say, if the point of order is correct, if the point of order is not correct, the point is not well taken. The amendment is germane because it has to do with the location of the party. And so the motion on the floor is the amendment of the main motion. So remember that the chair's duty is always to make sure everybody knows what's happening. If somebody raises a point of order, the chair has to let everyone know what is the answer to that, not just let it slide by. I have been to meetings where people were saying, "Objection, objection, point of order, point of order." And the chair would just listen and never respond to it. And so it's very frustrating to the assembly because nobody knows what the result of the point of order is. And you have to have some result for people to be able to understand it. Let's talk about parliamentary inquiry because that's one of your other options. The purpose of a parliamentary inquiry is to ask about the rules of or the parliamentary situation. So a question about the rules can be about the bylaws. It could be about Robert's rules. It really should be something that has to do with the business at hand. Don't just throw up some ridiculous question about that's totally off the topic. Everyone will look at you like you're crazy. The parliamentary situation is about what motions are currently on the floor, or what was the outcome of a vote, or what will be the process. So questions about the parliamentary process or where we are in the process, that's the parliamentary situation. Questions about the rules are, is this in order or is that not in order? Now, a parliamentary inquiry does not require any kind of a second, and it is not debatable. So it's not like a big discussion. It's a question to the chair, and like a point of order, the chair can consult with others and determine what is the correct answer. So, Mr. Chair, a parliamentary inquiry, and a parliamentary inquiry is, again, one of those things that has a preference. So the chair says, "The members recognize. Please state the parliamentary inquiry." And the member says, "Well, would it be in order at this time to," whatever, "move to commit the motion, Or would it be in order to move for recess? Or would it be in order now to send this to a committee? Would it be in order to create a special committee to handle this motion? So anything that you ever want to know about the process, or you don't know as a member of the assembly, you can just make a parliamentary inquiry. You could also be a how question, like how could we create a committee and have this, or how can we delay this to the next meeting? If you don't know how to do something with the parliamentary rules, just make a parliamentary inquiry, and the chair will tell you. The chair is the servant leader, so the chair's job is to help you accomplish what you, as a member of the assembly, want to do by helping you with knowing the rules and how to accomplish certain things. So it can be any question that has to do with the process. Now, questions about the parliamentary situation would be, what are we voting on now? Or there are 3 subsidiary motions on the floor. How will we vote on those? Or can you tell me what all the subsidiary motions are on the floor? That's a parliamentary situation. Or anything that has to do with where are we or what are we doing is the parliamentary situation. It could be a question. Does this require a majority vote or a 2/3 vote? That is, well, both about the rule, but more about the parliamentary situation, because that question is about a specific motion that's on the floor and not a general question about the rules. So, but any of those would be a parliamentary inquiry. Now, the chair, of course, needs to figure out what the answer is. The chair can consult with anyone, but the chair will answer the question. So it's a kind of a way of providing information. The chair does not say that point is well taken or not well taken during a parliamentary inquiry, because it's not a point of order. They're not challenging you and asking for a ruling. They're simply asking for advice or direction or help or assistance. Now, I have seen where people will stand up to make a parliamentary inquiry, and but they actually make a point of order, because they'll say something like, well, you did this such and such, and that didn't seem to be in order. So, and the chair can always choose to accept the motion in the way that, according to actually the motion. You name things for what they are, not for what the people call them. So somebody says, I have a parliamentary inquiry, and then they say, I think we're breaking the rules because we didn't follow this process. That's actually a point of order. So you would handle it in the same way as a point of order. But with a parliamentary inquiry, you don't make a ruling, you just answer the question and then go on to the next thing. You go back to whatever is the pending motion on the floor. Now, division of a question is a little bit complex. If you really want to show and impress the judges and everyone in the room that you're very smart and you really know your rules, then you can use division of a question, but you don't get any more points for that than division of the assembly. And so I don't know why you would, but the purpose of division of a question is to separate different parts of a motion that could stand alone. Now, for example, oh, and by the way, this does need a second. It is fully debatable, and it requires a majority vote to divide a question. It is also amendable. So, suppose someone has made a motion and seconded to have a bake sale and spend $100 on awards at the conference. Now, it may have been the idea of the maker that we're going to have a bake sale, and then we're going to use the money on awards at the conference. But we can't really assume that. We don't know if the organization already has $100 or not. Let's assume that they do. Having a bake sale is a completely separate idea from spending $100 on awards at the conference. Like, you can have a bake sale and not spend the money on awards, right? And you can also spend money on awards or not have the bake sale. So these two ideas, even though they may appear to be linked, they actually are completely separate. They're absolutely different ideas because one can be approved without the other. So that's how you know that they're really separate. So let's have someone say, the member says, after being recognized, I move that we divide the question in 2 parts, have a bake sale and spend $100 on awards at the conference. So what he wants to do, or she, is to have two votes, because maybe people will agree we should have a bake sale, but they don't want to spend money on awards. Or maybe people do want to spend money on awards, but they don't want to have a bake sale. So if everybody feels like they only want half of the motion, the thing could be voted down, even though some people may want to have a bake sale and some people may have the awards, spend money on the awards. So it's better to divide it, and then people can vote on one thing at a time. Remember that in parliamentary procedure, it's generally a yes or no question, right? And so if you say this very compounded question like, well, I think we should have a bake sale, and then we should spend $50 on awards, and then $10 on getting new lights, and $20 on this, and well, there's 5 or 6 different things in that motion. And maybe everybody agrees, like, oh yeah, that makes total sense, and let's all vote for it. That's fine. But if somebody says, yeah, I do want to raise the money, and I do think we should spend some money on awards, but I'm not sure about the light, replacing the light. I would like to vote on that separately. Then that's division of a question. Okay. Now, of course, there's other ways to do that, which you're probably already thinking of. You could amend. You could move to amend the motion to take out the lights. Or you could amend the motion to remove the $100 on awards at the conference if you completely don't want to do that at all. So this is just a different way of handling a situation where there's parts of a motion that you don't like or that you think won't pass. If you think maybe the whole thing won't pass because there's something objectionable in it, then you would move for division of a question. Now, it has to be seconded, like I say. It can be amended. Somebody could think of a different way of slicing up the question. That's fine. Obviously, this particular motion is very simple. There's not very many ways to divide it, but if it's a proposal or resolution or a full-page motion, there might be other ways of dividing it. So it requires a vote. So if there's a debate, and then there's a vote, and the chair says all those in favor of dividing the question, as and states the motion. You put the motion just like anything else. Have a bake sale separate from spend $100 on awards at the conference. If that is adopted, then each part would be considered as a separate motion. You don't have to make the motions again. They don't have to be seconded again. You simply consider the first question, which is, in this case, have a bake sale, and you have a debate or whatever on it, then you vote. And then the chair says, all right, now the second, or the next item of business is the second part of the divided question, which is to spend $100 on awards at the conference. Is there any discussion? So as you can see, the division of a question, where you can get in trouble is if you are trying to divide something that isn't divisible, or if you have something that's obviously divisible. There is an exception to the rule that under certain circumstances, the question must be divided upon the demand of a single member. So in order to really use this correctly, you have to know all those exceptions, and it's a little bit complicated. So you could very well do this incorrectly by having a vote on dividing a question that must be divided at the request of any member. So I would suggest just staying away from this one. If you're really spiffy, I'd be happy to, if you have a group that wants to do division of a question, I'm happy to provide a training for it. But generally speaking, stick with the division of the assembly. Why is that? Well, let me show you. Division of the assembly. The purpose is to verify a voice vote. So when we do a voice vote, we kind of go by which side is loudest. So an example would be the motion is it is moved and seconded to buy 3 blue office chairs. All in favor say aye. And then you have a bunch of people say aye. And then those opposed say no. Then a bunch of people say no. Now, it's generally easy on a voice vote to tell who's winning because you can hear one side is really louder than the other. But it might be really close. Or it might be that the one side is really mad about it. Like all the people who vote aye say aye, but the people who vote no say no. And so they have equal volume even though they don't have equal numbers. So if the people in the assembly don't agree with the decision of the chair, the decision will say, well, the ayes are in favor and therefore the motion is adopted. Anyone in the audience can ask for a division of the assembly, which is simply to verify the voice vote. Now, in a meeting, a parliamentary meeting, it's very transparent. Everyone can hear a voice vote. Everyone can know who won. Everyone can see when people are standing up, and they can judge for themselves whether if more people are standing than sitting. It's very easy. So the reason we have these rules is so that everyone can know and agree what is going on in a fair way. So to verify a voice vote, it does not require recognition. You do not have to say, Mr. Chair, I demand a division of the assembly. You can simply say from your seat, division. Anyone can say that. Anyone can ask for that. Even the chair can say the chair is unsure. Well, let's have a standing vote. So if the chair thinks it's too close to call, then he will go ahead and do the division on his own. He doesn't need to wait for anyone to ask for it. But if the chair thinks that he knows who won and who lost, and anyone disagrees with that, remember that all the decisions and everything that the chair does are always appealable to the body. So if somebody doesn't agree and they think that they clearly have the votes, then they would ask for a division. There's no second required. It's the right of any member. So let's look at an example. It's so simple. This is why I say do the division of the assembly. After a voice vote, anyone just says division. There you go. That's how you make the motion. Now, you do have to do the division right, which is you just have a standing vote, which means the chair would say, okay, we'll now have a division of the assembly. Those in favor of the motion to buy the office chairs, please stand. And then you just look. This is not a counted vote. It's simply a standing vote. Then, okay, please be seated. Those who are opposed, please stand. And then you just look. You don't have to count. It's not a counted vote. Simply a standing vote. Then the chair would then proceed as normal. He would say, although the ayes have it and the motion is adopted, or the noes have it and the motion is lost. You do not announce, okay, there's 3 for and 2 against. That's for a counted vote. That is not a division. Division is only a standing vote. It's not a counted vote. Now, in your competition, it will seem like you can announce the numbers because there's only 5 people there. So it's easy to see, well, there's 3 in favor and 2 against. But in a real meeting, you might have 100 people there, or 300 people, or 500 people. You're not going to take the time to count them in a division vote. It's simply a standing vote. So you have to remember that in your competition, it's as though you were in a large meeting. There's other people in the meeting that you don't see. They're imaginary people. You're following the rules as though it was a very large meeting. So just remember that and keep in mind that act as though it's a huge meeting, and then you can't go too far wrong. But now let me just make a note that any member can demand a division unless it's dilatory. Now I think I might have used that word earlier. Dilatory means that a member is using parliamentary procedure to frustrate the will of the body. Or in other words, they might be wasting time. They might be trying to put a monkey wrench in the works. They might be trying to slow things down. They might be just trying to annoy people. So if you have a vote that is clearly not even close, and somebody says division, or maybe you have somebody who says after every vote, division, 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 after every vote, it's just a waste of time. So if the chair feels like you are just intentionally trying to waste the time of the body, he just can ignore you. And so you say division, and the chair could say, well, that's dilatory. The results of the motion were clear, and we're not going to keep wasting time on this vote. And will the member please come to order? So that's all about division of the assembly. It's very simple to do. There's only one small thing you have to be sure of. Make sure that you announce it correctly. Don't announce a count because it's not a counted vote. You will get marked down for that. You simply announce it the same way that you would as a voice vote, as in, well, the ayes have it, and the motion is lost, or the noes have it, and the ayes have it, and the motion is adopted, or the noes have it, and the motion is lost. You don't announce the vote. Other than that, super simple. Well, that should get you through the privileged motions and incidental motions for the competition for FCCLA. I really respect that you are working hard on this. Learning parliamentary procedure is something that will help you all through your life and in organizations, even in your work. And being able to understand proper procedures in a meeting and how they will help the organization to make better, faster, and more enjoyable meetings. If you have any questions, of course, you can email me, kirby@parliamentarian.com. You can also go to my website and post a question in the Ask a Parliamentary Question process section at parliamentarian.com. And of course, there are other trainings there. And I've also have some other YouTube trainings. Just look for parliamentarian.com. Thank you, and good luck in your competition.